Game of the Year. It is that season, it's that time of the year, people. Jmulls Claus is coming down your chimney to deliver game yapping to you. 2023 has been an absolutely incredible year for games. One of the best that I can remember, at least since 2017. And likewise, because of that, the Game of the Year discussion has been raging the entire year. Trenches have been dug and people's opinions have become ironclad and resolute. So let's sit back, relax, and let's talk about the games industry and what I think is my personal Game of the Year. And I want to start this conversation off with Tears of the Kingdom. I'm gonna go in somewhat chronological order for the time that these games came out. I didn't play Resident Evil 4, I don't care about Resident Evil myself that much, so we're gonna start with The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom. A Nintendo Switch exclusive, but as a follow-up to the earlier Breath of the Wild, it has a lot to bring to the table. It brings with it innovative mechanics, an incredible player agency with user-created constructions. A lot of puzzle solutions exist for each puzzle in the game based upon your own creativity, even when there are kind of intended solutions. And by doing so, it allows for imagination to thrive. And that's honestly Tears of the Kingdom's greatest boon and what it brings to the table in terms of being a unique Zelda experience. The player agency, in terms of how you can overcome what the game throws at you, is incredible, and it's fun, and it makes you want to continue playing just to create wacky convention or inventions and to see what other people have managed to make. I've seen people make entire mechs that you can pilot in this game because the game is not afraid to give you the tools to make this stuff happen. And when you pair that with things like Quick Build that saves your favorite builds so that you can rapidly produce them later on so long as you have the components, the game just flows with itself and works with each aspect, creating a whole greater than the sum of its parts. And the new abilities that it provides on top of all this creativity in terms of what you can construct, it increases the incentivization to actually kill monsters, which was one of Breath of the Wild's biggest weaknesses, because you were just wasting stuff back then in the hopes that you would get something good. But here, you defeat monsters, you take their components, you can craft a decent amount of high-quality weapons with that on the whole. Or you can gain tools to create whatever engine or machine you want to build. So these new abilities and the reward and incentivization structures surrounding the game are great for the open world and the exploration that Tears of the Kingdom is trying to give you. And you pair that with the Underground, which was a nice surprise for the game, on top of an extremely strong introductory experience that bred mystery, intrigue, introduced the mechanics of the game in a really cohesive and fun and bite-sized format. I loved the initial Great Sky Island area for that. It was a great microcosm of what the game would be able to allow you to do later on, while still feeling somewhat open and non-linear. Despite the fact that, yeah, it was kind of linear, but it let you go where you wanted, and it let you tackle these puzzles in ways that felt like you were coming up with a creative solution to them. On top of the story with Ganondorf and Zelda at the beginning, that was interesting and intriguing. The story is an immediate hook and also a darker tone, and I love that. I love when Zelda tends to go darker with its atmosphere and tone, like in Majora's Mask or Twilight Princess. And the same with Tears of the Kingdom. Seeing dehydrated Ganondorf, a great moment. But I do think the game has some issues, and let's get into the cons of Tears of the Kingdom, and what honestly kind of prevents it from being a Game of the Year for me personally, but these may not be that important to you. I can only tell you what I think and how my experiences went. I think the game has an over-reliance on flashbacks, and it hurts the narrative flow and the pacing of the game. For me, I tackled all the memories in about 2 hours back to back, compared to over 50 or however many hours I took to play the game. It just felt like there wasn't enough of a ratio between the story moments and the actual gameplay game time. And by relying too much on these flashback experiences, I didn't care about most of the characters in this game. And once again, we don't get a consistent dynamic between Zelda and Link because they're separated. Whereas in Breath of the Wild, all we got were those memories and scattered lines of dialogue in our brain, like Final Fantasy XIV's Echoes or something. Here, we get that initial bit, and then it's just flashbacks. And I really want them to do one of these games with a story that takes place primarily in the modern day, with Link and Zelda in tow. That's what I really want, because these characters work so much better when they're together, in my opinion, but they always forcibly separate them. It's one of the reasons that I love the memories of Breath of the Wild, was because you had the dynamic of Zelda with Link. And I think, despite Link being a largely silent protagonist, that dynamic really works. And it raises the stakes and keeps me more invested in the actual goings-on of the game, that you just don't really get in Tears after that introductory experience. And you pair that with the fact that they reused Hyrule, and I think it can work for this game, but it definitely drags on over time to feel a little bit too samey for me as the hours roll on. There's a legitimate argument you can make that, oh, the world feels different because the tools they give you to navigate and explore the world are fundamentally different. And I do agree, and I think that helps, especially your first half of the time playing the game. But eventually, you'll start to feel like, okay, this is still just Hyrule. You pair that with, in my opinion, the sky being too underdeveloped and repetitive in its offerings in terms of the locations you get in the sky, and the Great Sky Island, that introductory experience, is by far my favorite aspect of the sky, and that's the introduction. The rest of it just kind of feels repetitive, copy and paste-esque. Too much like it was designed not to feel like an open world or to give you an open world bite-sized experience, but more like it's designed to give you the same 3-esque puzzles over and over and over again. And also, it's a Nintendo Switch game, which isn't a problem in of itself, but the game runs poorly. And the game often dips well below 30 FPS, which in my opinion shouldn't even be the minimum, but it dips below 30 FPS often, and stutters and lags on occasion, especially whenever there's more than like 2 trees on the screen. And for a game that has quite a few combat mechanics based around the idea of your reaction timing and the window, it makes the combat feel more clunky, as if you're going through tar, and just unresponsive and not as fun and engaging as it could have been on a system where performance wouldn't have been an issue. Personally, I wouldn't have minded an option to tone the graphics down significantly, just to maintain, say, 30 FPS everywhere in the game, or hell, even 60 somehow, but the game doesn't provide that. And you pair those cons for me, alongside the fact that I still think dungeons and boss design in this Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom era are still lackluster. I think Tears, I can understand if people have Tears of the Kingdom as their game of the year, because I think the game brings to the table a lot of pros and positives, and is a great game on the whole. You gotta remember, every game that I'm gonna be talking about in this video, probably like a 9.5 out of 10 minimum for me. Maybe 9.0 out of 10. I love all of these games that I'm talking about, but when we're talking about which game is my favorite of the year, I have to get nitpicky, but even here, these aren't nitpicks. These are valid criticisms for me as to what detracts from the overall experience. I think if they're going to do another game in this style, you need a new map, you need better dungeons, you need better boss design on the whole that doesn't feel as one-dimensional as many of the bosses in this game do. I think the final fight is amazing, funnily enough. The final boss fight against Ganondorf, by far and away, the best boss they've had not only in Tears of the Kingdom, but also in Breath of the Wild. It's a really fun fight. Do more fights in that style with multiple mechanics that they bring to the table that I have to overcome. Do more like that. I know you can do it because you did it here. Now we move on to my top 3. For me, one of my top 3 games, and a game that was the far and away game of the year for me when I was at least playing it, Final Fantasy XVI. I love this game. I really do. We gotta get into it, because my opinions may be a little bit controversial. I love the story of Final Fantasy XVI. It's sublime in my opinion. The pacing is great on the whole, but it has a tendency to focus on filler boat building sections. You know what I'm talking about. Too often at some points. They do allow for these moments to flesh out some character dynamics and have some introspection to them, but they still feel like filler till you get to the next plot point. It's a cadence in terms of pacing that I think can work for an MMORPG, like Final Fantasy XIV, which is the same team that did this game. It was the Heavensward team, but still, technically. Like, this pacing works in that game because you're expecting to play that game for hundreds of hours, and for that story to always be updated and expanded on periodically. That's not the case with Final Fantasy XVI, so I think that style of pacing doesn't necessarily work here. But the combat is fun and replayable, and while it may be polarizing to people who prefer the old school style of Final Fantasy turn-based or ATB combat, I do enjoy this take on the more Devil May Cry aspect of things. It has decent customization and progression, and I love that each icon kind of has its own strengths and cons that you can utilize and mix and match to your advantage. But my issue with this is as the time goes on and the game goes on, the later icons that you get just aren't as fun for me as the early ones, and they feel a bit too gimmicky. Mainly Bahamut and Odin for me. Bahamut's playstyle is often way too passive in my opinion, for my interests, or relies on way too many channeled casts that takes you out of the flow and rapidity of the actual combat loop. And that's the strength of the combat loop, and when you take me out of that, to me it's a bit of a con. My other issue is with Odin. Now you may be asking, why these two icons specifically? Does it even really matter? Well, these are two of the final 3 icons you unlock in the game. So for a big chunk of your time with this game, I'm unlocking things that weren't as fun for me as the icons I unlocked earlier on. But I don't want to just use the ones I've already unlocked because I've been playing with them for tens of hours at this point, so they're becoming a little bit old and stale for me, so I try and use the new ones, but they don't hit the same. Odin relies on building up your bar so you can do this giant one-hit KO ability that's AoE for pretty much everything you see. That ability is really cool, but it makes all the other abilities feel like you're hitting them with a wet noodle. They don't feel visceral or fun or give you a lot of good feedback mechanically, at least in my opinion. And you pair that with, in my opinion, I think the basic melee combos are too one-dimensional because there's no... Really all you're doing, outside of using icon abilities, is weaving between magic bursts and physical attacks. There's no strong attacks, there's no real multi-webbed out combos that you can invoke or utilize to your advantage. There's nothing really like that outside of what you can weave together with the icon abilities, which are cool, but when you use them over and over and over again, because there's a few that are really strong, they get a little bit repetitive for me. So I think the combat starts out amazing, and I want to get better at it, and I did get better at it. And I had so much fun parrying attacks and dodging stuff, and utilizing all those tools in my repertoire to my advantage. This is a combat style that I would like to see them try again, and just deep dive into it and flesh it out some more, because this is a great blueprint that can be expanded on in the future to make it even more fun and engaging, and more long-term. And you pair that with the fact that the music is S tier. This is a Soken masterclass in my opinion, with one of my favorite soundtracks in recent years. It's incredible. Find the Flame, oh my god, it's so good. The credits song, My Star, all these songs that you hear throughout the game are so good and well written and designed, and they add to the emotional impact and your intrigue and immersion in the game. And that's when a soundtrack is at its best, in my opinion, is when it's not just the songs that are good, it's the fact that they elevate everything surrounding them as well. You pair that with the visuals being striking and an excellent blend of medieval fantasy and Final Fantasy aesthetics, and I love the world of Elistea. The characters are well written, they're fleshed out and unique, and they all add something to the story. But, in my opinion, I think the story and the gameplay kind of peak halfway-ish through the game with Bahamut. It might be more like 70%. And it's still good afterwards, don't get me wrong, but it just isn't as good as that first chunk of the game from the beginning to Bahamut, in my opinion. Both in terms of story, pacing, and gameplay. Though I do think the final fight is really fun and well constructed. But I won't go into specifics to avoid spoilers here. But I will say, and I've talked about this before, and my opinions haven't changed. I don't like the ending. I just don't. Unless there's eventually a follow-up, which I'm not banking on. I just don't like how they did the ending. And for a game with only one ending, that becomes more of an issue for me. Especially for a game that is as story-heavy and forward as Final Fantasy XVI. I love Armored Core 6. I think this game is severely underrated, and in my opinion, comes into my number 2 spot for Game of the Year. I love this game so much. What a comeback for not only Armored Core, but mecha games as a whole. This game reignited old passions for so many people. Amazing world design and development. FromSoft does it again with a dark, macabre, post-apocalyptic-esque world design that just pulls you in, and with unique storytelling, grabs you and refuses to let go. The story can be off-putting or confusing and hard to follow, but comes together to make something really memorable for me. Amazing dialogue, amazing moments, it hypes you up, it gets down in the weeds and emotional. It's great. Beautiful visuals, love the music and the sound design as well. The mission design is really good on the whole, and I love the sense of scale that some of these missions can invoke upon you. It's a game of simplicity, and utilizing that simplicity to its basic advantages. It doesn't need to introduce a character for 10 hours to make them compelling. It understands just having cool themes and motifs and being able to run with them and utilize them to the best of their abilities. The boss fights are well-constructed, multi-dimensional, and fun to replay, though I do think, in my opinion, a little bit inconsistent with the difficulty. Only really ever had struggles with one fight, which was Baldur. But again, why are FromSoft games so fun and engaging? It's not the difficulty, in my opinion. Because I think Armored Core 6 on the whole is rather an easy game unless you're going for like S ranks or like bad builds. They're fun because the mechanics keep you on your toes. They look beautiful. They're iconic. The dialogue you have, the scenes, the feel of each encounter and environment that you're in pulls you in and keeps you engaged and immersed. And that's where that's where Armored Core 6 really shines. I think weapon diversity is good on the whole, but it starts to feel really unbalanced as you play more and more. And while weapons in certain subclasses may have a little bit of a difference here and there, it does kind of feel like you have kinetic machine guns, you have shotguns, laser shotguns, rockets, etc. You know what I mean, right? It feels, as the game goes on, as if the weapon sandbox is smaller than it is. I also think the game utilizes similar looking locations a bit too much. Could have done with a tad more mission uniqueness in New Game Plus playthroughs as well. Would have liked to see maybe 1 or 2 new biomes as well. But the lighting in this game is absolutely gorgeous. Oh my god, the use of color as well, with the contrast between the reds and the grays of the world, it's so good. I love Armored Core 6, I love it so much. To me, it's a game not nearly talked about as much as it should. I haven't played Spider-Man, but even if I did, from all that I've seen, it wouldn't be my game of the year, though it's a really good game and I can understand why it's yours. Okay, moving on. Baldur's Gate 3. I mean, what else can be even said about this game? This is a game that has gripped me and pulled me in like few other games have. In a stellar year for games releases, it's so hard to have one game you can point to and just say, yep, that's game of the year. That's Baldur's Gate 3 for me. And to me, it's so far and away game of the year that for many major publications, if they don't pick Baldur's Gate 3, I question what went behind that decision. It's a giant behemoth of a game without any predatory monetization or microtransactions that received free updates, making it even better, and even adding a whole new epilogue without even having a base price of $70. It stuck to $60. And for a game of this scope and size, even within the first 5 hours, I wanted to make multiple new characters just to see all the different routes and possibilities of the things I had only experienced in those first couple of hours. The player agency in this game is exactly what it makes it so well beloved, and what makes it being a D&D game work so well. It is your adventure, your party that you interact with, filled with strong and memorable characters. This early on for me, I'm only speaking from my experience here. I haven't even gotten past Act 1 yet. I have over 19 hours in this game already, 2 of which is in a second character, and I just want to play more and more and more and more. An incredible soundtrack, one of the best introductory experiences I've seen in recent years. Combat is fun, but it's D&D, so you may not like it, but if you do like it, there's so many different builds I want to try, and I feel rewarded and punished for the consequences of my actions, which is what you want in a game like this. My actions matter, they have weight, and that's a frequent occurrence. It's not some one-off decision that has a ton of impact. It's all these decisions you are making, moment to moment to moment to moment, that you are constantly making, but you forge your own story by doing so and utilizing your party's strengths, like using Asterion, my thief, to detect traps and open locks and to be stealthy. I can take risks with certain dice rolls or play it safe. Every little interaction and moment in this game has some kind of weighty decision behind it. The game lets go of my hands and takes the training wheels off and just lets me play the game and explore and create my own story, and that is something I've been craving so much, and I didn't even realize till I started playing this game. This was a game designed first and foremost with the sole idea of providing the consumer an adventure to be fun and interesting and replayable, with no strings attached. This is a game that can easily go for over hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours if you wanted to. Or if you want to just mainline the main story, I'm pretty sure you can. The game doesn't forbid you from playing it any type of way that you want. You'll just go on your own adventure and have your own story that you can share and tell. And if you want to replay it in a different way to experience a different story, you can as well. The game gives you the functionality, it gives you the liberty to do that. In terms of value, bang for your buck, nothing comes close to Baldur's Gate 3 this year. And in terms of quality, there's few that come to the quality of Baldur's Gate 3. It's not just a great game, it's a statement. A statement to the industry at large that games of this quality, of this scope and size, that allows for player agency, that doesn't need to follow trends or whatever, can still exist and do so well in the year 2023. Larian have done it again, and in my opinion, I haven't even gotten through Act 1. When I look at the industry through an objective lens, what game had the most impact? It's Baldur's Gate 3. When I look at what game I'm enjoying the most right now, of the games that I've completed, it's close between Final Fantasy XVI and Armored Core 6. When I look at the experience that I've had in Baldur's Gate 3 so far, and realize that it's likely to not drop off, and even if I don't like one ending, this game has so many other endings, I can just find one that I like. Right now, my game of the year is Baldur's Gate 3. But what an amazing year for games on the whole. Because my list may look different from your list. Because my preferences may be different from yours, and that is fine. That is one of the great aspects of a year in gaming like this, where so many different types of games come out that can appeal to many different types of players. And that's a great thing in my opinion. Because what appeals to me may not appeal to you, and what appeals to you may not appeal to me. So here's what I want you to do. In the comments down below, tell me what your game of the year is, and why, and your favorite memory from that game. I'd love to hear your stories, hear your opinions and your perspectives. And while you're down there, please leave a like and subscribe. It really helps the channel out and helps support future content. I greatly appreciate it. And I stream on this YouTube channel dang near every day, so tune in if you want to hear me and chat. Have a grand time in whatever game we are playing. We laugh, we sometimes cry, so stick around and find out. Thank you all for tuning in, stay safe, have a great day, and I'll see you all next time. Hit the bell icon to be notified when I upload and stream in the future. Bye bye everybody, until we meet again!